Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. I'm Ajahn Sona. Let's begin with the first question, Pia.
Ajahn, our first question from the live stream is from BC67 in New Jersey, United States. Ajahn, would you be able to expand on the idea that anger arises from delusion and ignorance? It seems to me a sometimes normal response that, if suppressed, could be unhealthy.
This is a fairly standard concern or puzzle for people if they're raised with various psychological theories. Buddhism really is advocating the complete abandonment of anger and aversion, and does not concern itself that it will be suppressed. It's not suppressed, it's not repressed, it's removed. Well, just think in ordinary life. Some people are angry at the weather, angry at the politics, angry at their life, angry at why other people weren't more kind to them or something like this. Others think it's absurd to be angry about the weather. So they're not angry about the weather because the weather's not in their control. And they're not repressing or suppressing their anger. So basically, it's trying to uproot the anger through, philosophical reflection, like what the futility of being angry at circumstances that are beyond your control. And then there's some reflections on why would you be angry at circumstances even if they are under your control? What is the function of anger? By the way, the psychological schools and some philosophical schools that think anger is good or there's healthy anger, useful anger, they're not totally wrong. It's just that it's quite normative. So yes, there are people who are simmering with anger. I think what they're trying to get at is, a psychologist or a psychiatrist has a patient, or what they call a client, comes in and they're really having trouble. And as they question them, they find that they're simmering with anger, and they hesitate to express it, and they don't get over it. It's just there all the time. So, yeah, you can understand why the advice then would be, well, you have to stand up for yourself. You have to express the situation or something like that. Anyway, these are all not truly clear insights. These are all, it seems sensible, because you're starting from the point of view that anger is just natural and necessary. Mm-hmm. How are you going to function without anger? If you're being treated unjustly, you have to be angry and or have righteous anger. What about social issues that are where injustice is being promoted? Shouldn't you be angry about that? Shouldn't you have righteous anger about that? There's some inheritance of that from Christianity, but from a more philosophical point of view, this is not just a Buddhist philosophical point of view, but some of the Greek philosophers as well, the Stoics and so forth. They say, well, what is the point of this emotion called anger? That doesn't help you discern injustice, and it doesn't help you speak about injustice. Knowledge, awareness of the details of the situation, accurate knowledge, and the ability to formulate thoughts might help with the situation, or being active about the situation, going out. If the people are starving on the street and you're furious about it, how does that help them? It would be better if you just went out and fed them, or you promoted a system of government assistance to them, something like that. But how is it that anger helps the situation? So some people would reply to that, say, anger is your motivation. Because you're angry, you're motivated, and you're going to do something about it. But there's all kinds of things you do about situations which are not motivated by anger. Kindness and creativity and playfulness is also a motivator for doing things. So if when a mother taking care of her children, I don't think it needs to be because she's angry. I think it's because she loves them, and she might also be playful and enjoy, creative with them. And that is a great motivator and achieves success with a lot of things. So the question is, do you need this thing called anger as a motivator? And if you're not angry, is there something unhealthy about not being angry? So you have to analyze this carefully. And many great philosopher and certainly the Buddha himself has gone into it with great care. So there are times, of course, when you need to not act or speak on your anger, because quite often anger is you say things or you do things which you later regret. When your mind clears up and you're in a state of ease, you change your mind about what you said or what you did. So you have to learn from this that when you're angry, you're prone to say things and do things that you later, under better circumstances, you regret. So you think, okay, when I'm angry, I think I need to count to 10. So that's the attitude, the Buddha's attitude about this. Anger is very natural. It's built into animals because animals can't work through things, in a intellectual way. So anger is a fight response, and that's fine. And humans are animals, and they're born often with these flight or fight responses as well. But there are other circuits that can be cultivated. You don't want to remain just operated by your basic operating system that you're born with. You'll see babies can get very angry. But once you reach a point of clarity and ability to reflect, you can sort through these things. And things that formerly you were angry about, you will no longer be angry about. And you won't be suppressing it, and you won't be repressing it. This concern about repression is very Freudian. Freud is attributing some sort of unconscious repression to a lot of things as somehow coming out, making you sick in other ways, etc. This theory is not proven. There's all kinds of unverifiable assumptions in many of these Freudian theories, but they shaped a lot of attitudes in psychiatry and in psychology, and they need to be thoroughly relooked at. Much of Freudian theory has been dismissed. These days, a lot is in the past. So understand that you're inheriting a whole kind of pop psychology vocabulary and language and attitudes that may not be accurate. And they permeate the culture. They're part of certain Christian ideas as well. Buddhism has different ideas about this, and it's treated in a very careful and lucid way. And you need to learn about what the problem with anger is, and that you can function and your life will be much better without the need for anger, and to replace it with other motivators, other emotional motivators that are positive. Okay, let's go on to the next question.
Next question from the live stream is from Alex in Girona, Spain. Dear Ajahn Sona, during the last few years of intensive practice and introspection in monasteries, I have boiled down all my problems and deficiencies to one cause: obsessive perfectionism. On one hand, it helps me excel and be very effective on anything I try, but it also makes me feel stressed, rigid, forceful, and impatient, resulting in mental imbalance and burnouts. Any suggestions?
Well, that's a very good insight that you've had. You've recognized the problem with perfectionism. And Buddhism has a lot of stories about that, that whole issue. And in monasteries and in training situations for monks, they will see some personalities are perfectionist, and usually the abbot will ask them to, experiment with this, to do things not perfectly. What wisdom knows is what's good enough. So this is the very good, an interesting phrase that maybe you get it tattooed on your wrist. What's good enough? Good enough is the middle way. There are other extremes of completely disorganized and inefficient or deficient kind of attitudes to things, and then there's perfectionism. Perfectionism, it can be quite dangerous. There are many, many cases of people, because they're perfectionists, they become self-destructive as well. They're furious with themselves because they fail, or they don't get straight A's. They miss an A, or they don't get into medical school or something like this. It can be incredibly dangerous to oneself to be a perfectionist. One can, with the right attitude, one can produce beauty. I mean, say a classical musician who is performing at the highest levels. They're seeking exquisite performances. But even in that case, they must be coached, psychologically aware, not to be overcritical about the possibility of, missing a note, or this kind of thing can be very damaging to oneself, and that it's not really the wishing to be perfect that makes you perfect. It's actually putting in the causes of a good performance, or a good project. It all comes back to the causes, and it's not about willing perfection, because willing it doesn't produce it. It's whether the causes, the correct causes have been put in. That's all that matters, and nothing else can affect it. It's not about wishing and wanting that it would be perfect. It's about finding the causes which produce that result. So a calculator, when you push a calculator, you put three numbers. You put 987 times 600.08 something. Push the button, calculate. The calculator is not hoping for perfection and not fearing failure. It just calculates, because we know the causes of how you get numbers. So little circuits are flashing. And it's not afraid that it is going to be wrong either. So Learn from the Calculator. Oh, that's a new novel, I think, or maybe a book. I think I'll write a book called Learn from the Calculator. So this trait called perfectionism, associated with frustration and self-doubt, is unhealthy. And one must, take up a few stories from the philosophers about non-perfectionism. There's a story from the Zen monastery. So the Zen student is asked to get the leaves out of the courtyard. They have these beautiful gravel gardens, and leaves from the trees fall in the gravel garden. So he goes out and he rakes up the leaves, and then the master comes out, and there's still a fringe of leaves around the edge, and the master comes out and picks up a whole handful of these leaves and says, not good enough. And then he leaves, and then the student rakes up every single leaf in the courtyard. And the master comes back to check on his work. And then from that handful of leaves, he takes a few of them and throws them back down. Says, now that's good enough. So the idea here is that it's not getting every last leaf, but it's not being sloppy either. There's something in between which is good enough. So you're going to have to hunt down some stories for you to do that and practice just finding out what is good enough. Okay, next question.
Ajahn, our next comment actually is from Jane on the live stream. Thank you, Ajahn Sona and the team at Birken, for giving these wonderful talks to the world. It has released myself and others from so much suffering.
Well, that is our aim. And the only reason that I can do this is that I have spent decades immersed in the teachings of the Buddha, historical Buddha. I would never have been able to think of this stuff myself. And hardly anybody else on the planet could have. There are some philosophers in history that have come close. I talk about the Stoics and Socrates and a few other great historical figures of philosophy that they come across some of the same ideas, but none of them to the exquisite analysis and perfection that the Buddha does. What the Buddha is also a great teacher. And this is what he says, is that he has various kind of psychic powers, but the most important of these is to teach, is to be able to teach somebody how to suffer less. And there are mystics out there that apparently, transcend their suffering and have insights into these things, but they're not able to formulate or express them very well. So that's the greatest of the Buddha's miraculous power is the power to share the teachings with others, share the path with others. Before we do that, though, it's good to immerse ourselves in that and spend years or even decades just seeing how it works and finding out for ourselves that it does work. And then we can more confidently express it in our own culture and in our own language to help others as well. Okay, next.
Next question from the live stream is from Abstract Mind Zero. Does, quote, unconditioned, unquote, mean outside space and time? What are we conditioned by at the deepest level? One might argue, well, ignorance, but is ignorance Nietzsche? If not, presuming that anicca, change, and time can be taken as synonymous expressions for the same idea, then ignorance itself is conditioned by time. In fact, without time, there would be no dependent origination at all. Your thoughts?
Yes, not everybody may have followed that, but it's fairly sensible and straightforward. Ignorance is kind of the primary problem behind suffering. Sometimes in the Four Noble Truths, the second noble truth is there is a cause of suffering, and sometimes that cause of suffering is given as craving or clinging, but also, and I think a deeper root is ignorance, avidya. So the root cause of the problem of the suffering is ignorance, and then we have another term that that person has used called dependent origination, and this is a sophisticated explanation by the Buddha of how things work. So it's causal theory, just as science talks about causal theories. You know, why does your kettle boil? You know, why does water boil, or why is it warmer when there's cloud cover than when the sky is clear, etc. These kind of things are what is a solar eclipse, a lunar eclipse. These are causal explanations. So the Buddha, 2,500 years ago, had insight into the causal structures of human distress. So this is, first of all, he sets out the most important thing, the most important knowledge that one could have is not just science about how, you know, why the sun comes up in the morning, this kind of stuff. It's the most important scientific question, the most important human question is, why do we suffer? And so all of his causal explanations are to be used for that end, the purpose of coming to the end of suffering. So this is the Four Noble Truths. There is suffering. That's a big problem. It's the biggest problem. And it has a cause, and it can be cured. And then the Eightfold Path is the path to cure that. The person says, who is asking the question, also says, conditioned, the unconditioned, they use the term the unconditioned. This is a synonym for nibbana, nirvana, the unconditioned. And they say, they deduce that in order for something to be unconditioned, it must be outside of space and time. And that's a good conclusion. That's a good conclusion. So this is the case that in order to attain this final nirvana, this final freedom, this final release, the release must be outside of conditions that are, you can't have your happiness, your well-being depend on conditions. So the suffering that humans experience is based on conditions. And in order to free ourselves from that, we have to go to the unconditioned. It must function outside of space and time. There are two types of this achievement of nibbana. One is during the life of a person. And if a person is fully enlightened, then they're called an arahant. And they are free from the psychological suffering, distress of conditions. Their body, though, is still subject to pains and ill health. They still feel the cold and the heat and sharp pains in the body. They still feel that. So that the conditioning is still there for the body. But psychologically, they are not emotionally distraught from ill health or things like that. And they also, other things occur to them. People they know for a long time die and or get sick, and they're not distressed by this. They're not emotionally distressed by this. So this is the nibbana achieved during life. And then at some point, that arahant, that fully enlightened person, dies. And at that is called pari nibbana, final nibbana, or the ultimate nibbana. And at that point, there is said to be no further rebirth in any conceivable world, in any conceivable condition. Something, this final nirvana, this pari nibbana, must be beyond space and time, must not be subject to conditioning. That at that point, most people scratch their heads. And what does that mean? And you shouldn't. To use that casually as if it had a lot of meaning to it betrays the fact that you haven't really thought about it. So there are two attitudes to this, meaning that pari nibbana is the end, this absolute cessation of all of that being is, and therefore is beyond all, is no longer involved in conditioning. And the other attitude is that it's it's not nothing. It's not complete destruction. That some sort of consciousness which is unconditioned and not subject to space and time persists. The objection to that is that those are words that can be spoken, but do those words point to anything that you can possibly conceive of? So the debate goes on to this day. What is this pari nibbana? What happens at the death of the arahant? The debate is fairly clear. There's not that much debate about the experience of the arahant while alive. There's quite a bit of information about how that person experiences existence. And one of the lists that tell you about that is the 7 factors of enlightenment. So the enlightened mind still has factors going on, and mindfulness is present, investigation of truth is present, energy and joy is present, serenity is present, deep concentration and focus is present, and balanced equanimity is present. These are the inner contents of the arahant's mind and emotional system. So this is fairly easy to grasp. That's something that we can grasp. And those enlightenment factors are aloof from the conditions of life around one. So one is stable in these intellectual and emotional factors. So that's the kind of the process. I won't go into too much into this dependent origination, but it is clear that ignorance is the issue, and through a causal process you can deactivate ignorance, and what is left is knowledge. So this word ignorance is not knowing, not knowledge, non-knowledge. And so when you take off the ig, there's just knowledge left. And this is identical in Pali, avijja, not knowledge. Vijja is knowledge. Avijja is the absence of knowledge. So what happens when you deconditioned ignorance? You're left with knowledge, vijja. Okay.
Next question is from Ling in Paris, France. Dear Ajahn Sona, where can I find your guided meditation videos, if there are some?
There are some on our YouTube channel. So you must comb through the YouTube channel, and some of them will, in the title, I think, will have guided meditation. I did some there is some on loving kindness. Now, when you talk about loving or guided meditation on loving kindness, the best way is to hear a lot of talks on the subject of loving kindness, which inspires you to practice this. It's not like being like a hypnotic session, bringing you into loving kindness, but more or less telling you all of the wonderful advantages and benefits of loving kindness. I do have a substantial talk on the 11 benefits of loving kindness, and also a number of talks on the sutta, the Metta Sutta, the Sutta Discourse on Loving Kindness. So there's about, I don't know, a dozen talks on these at least. So that's the kind of guided meditation talk that I would recommend for learning loving kindness. For breath meditation, it's simply the instructions of how to do it. And I've given instructions on how to do breath meditation. So that's the guided meditation for breath meditation. There's also some other subjects which were used at the time of the Buddha and afterwards. And these are called kasina meditations. And I did a whole series of videos on that are the images. We used all kinds of images to illustrate this. And I give some sort of guided meditation on how to meditate on these kasina objects. The kasinas are earth, air, fire, water, and the color kasinas of red, blue, yellow, and white, and fire kasina as well, so light kasina rather. So those are gone into in great detail as well. So basically I've given all kinds of instructions about how to do it. They're all on the channel, by the way. You go to Ajahn Sona channel. When you type in on the YouTube search bar, Ajahn Sona channel, that will bring you into the whole collection of 330 or so videos and talks. Okay?
Next question from the live stream is from Charles. Dear Ajahn, in MN 20, Buddha says that, quote, if when a monk is directing his attention to a particular sign, bad, unskillful thoughts arise in connection with that sign, then he should direct his attention to a different sign, unquote. Could you please explain what is meant by, quote, sign in this context?
The sign is the sign is the sign of fault or the beautiful. So what arouses ill will, aversion, and anger is seeing or extracting the sign, the mind-produced data on a fault in a person, in the weather, in nature. If you're listening to music and somebody plays something out of tune, and you think you have some anger towards that, that's the sign of a fault, and that's the root of ill will. And then the other sign, which the monk must be concerned with, is the sign of the beautiful, the attractive. And that's also mentally extracted from a situation. And so the monk is seeking to become free of both aversion and desire. These are the two psychic irritants that prevent one from truly being well. When you're trapped in the polarity of desire and aversion, you cannot experience the the wonderful nature of mind when it is freed from these harassments, from these psychic irritants. The mind actually, when it's freed from these two things, this aversion and attraction, goes back to its more or less original nature, which is luminous and joyful and energized, if it's not being harassed, you know. So, you know, it's like even an animal. If an animal is being provoked, and say a dog, you've got a dog, and there's a cat around that is just destroying the dog's peace, or the dog is obsessed with a treat or a little bit of food or something like that. Compare that state to them at peace. They've been fed, there's nothing around, there's no danger around, there's nothing annoying them, and they're curled up on their little bed and they're just enjoying themselves, they're relaxing. So this is the same for humans, you know. When you're not being harassed, having unwelcome kind of situations thrust upon you, nor are you craving and wanting something, your mind is at peace, mind is at ease. So this is the clue, is instead of just depending on the world to bring you these conditions, you need to change your mind. So the monk changes his focus of attention when he's seeing things that have the sign of the aversive, the sign of the fault. He redirects his mind to something that gives him the sign of peace, makes him feel at ease and peaceful. And the same when he notices that he's obsessing about some attractive thing, food or women or things like this, he changes the direction of his mind, so he's not feeling a sense of desire. Desire, by the way, is a sense of loss or a sense of lack. If you lack something, you're not at ease. The moment you want something is the moment you lack something, and you're in a state of deficit. And the moment you have aversion is the moment you are uncomfortable. Aversion is a form of illness. You feel slightly not well. So this is what is meant by that in the middle-length sayings 20, Sutta 20. Yeah.
Next question from the live stream is from Earth Opus. Dear Ajahn, I discovered the Dhamma at 18 during college and struggled to relate to my peers immersed in Western youth culture, making foolish decisions. The feeling of isolation is powerful. Any advice?
That is the inevitable consequence of being wise. So when you wise up, if it's like being a good trained musician, you don't want to play or sing with people who can't sing in tune or play. It's not fun. If you're a great athlete, you don't want to play with people who are clumsy amateurs. You spend time and you know how beautiful it can be. With skills, you know how good it can be. And you just naturally don't want to play with people who have none of those skills. There's no point in it. But that means most of the world is not skillful in in many areas. There's only a few very, very skillful athletes. There's only a few very, very skillful musicians. There's only a few very, very skillful mathematicians. There's only a few very virtuous people. So those are you've narrowed your capacity for interaction with others. They disappear from the suitable companion framework. But that's not a bad thing. Do you really want to hang out with fools just for the sake of hanging out? It's worse than nothing. The Buddha has a saying: it's better to go alone than with a fool for company. You should really internalize that for all of the audience. Some of you are associating with the foolish. You've got you have people that you're hooked in with that are foolish and cause you distress, but you have ideas that you must continue to associate with them, etc. And it's a real revelation and a wonderful thing to discover that you really shouldn't, that you should free yourself from these associations. And sometimes it means going alone. So solitude, for most people, solitude is, they're afraid of solitude, but it's better than being with foolish people. So that's the consequence of wising up, is that you have fewer people to associate with. But you can find other wise people. There are other wise people around. So you should seek their company. And you will feel well and enlivened and enriched by association with the wise. And you will feel the opposite when you associate with the foolish.
Next question from the live stream is from Prajat in India. Dear Ajahn, the nature of mind is to seek and get attached to certain ideas. This seeking creates various social, political, economic, and personal complications. How can we move beyond these attachments and seeking for good?
Yeah, this is well known, and the phrase that we use often in the monastery and in Dhamma groups is attachments to views and opinions. So you become attached to a view and opinion. Notice the political scene these days is fraught with high tension. These are views and opinions. And people have views and opinions about their sports teams, about fashion, about food, about what's healthy for you. Should you jog? Should you not jog? Should you eat bacon? No, or not? No. Does certain things clog your arteries? Should you be a vegan or a vegetarian, or should you pescatarian? That's somebody who eats fish. Or are certain foods bad for you or not? Should you live a wild life and leave a beautiful corpse, or should you try to live a long life? And so this is views and opinions. And when you attach strongly to these things, you just suffer. People think, well, how can I not have a political opinion? I mean, aren't certain things bad for you? And shouldn't I feel angry or hostile towards that? What will happen to the world if we don't have opinions? Well, you can have opinions, but it's the attachment to the view and opinion. That is, that your emotions are, you're a puppet, and your strings are being pulled by this kind of information. They don't need to be pulled. you're searching around using your intellect and consulting other people who know things about things in order to come up with the best ideas, right? But it's when you hook your emotional states into this that the problems occur. So this is what is meant by detachment from views and opinions. This is one of the most sophisticated areas. A lot of people learn Dhamma and so forth. This is one of the hardest things for people to understand. Attachments to views and opinions. So can you sit watching a television program of, if you're a left-winger, can you sit watching a right-wing political program and not react? If you're a right-winger, can you sit watching a lefty program and not react? Can you just allow the words to be in the air and not have a reaction to them? You might intellectually think they're wrong. This is simply wrong, and I know why they're wrong. But how do you feel in the midst of those conversations? India has its own little interesting nationalism. It has its right-wing and left-wing things. Is Marxism better for India, or is right-wing capitalism better? Is nationalism better, or should you have more a sense of internationalism? all kinds of there's all kinds of should there be independent states in North India? Should the Punjab be independent? On and on. It triggers people. It sets off their emotions, right? To the degree that they'll kill each other over this. These are views and opinions, and one is deeply attached to them. But we are saying, in order to be free, you can't be attached to your views and opinions. You can have ideas, you can know right from wrong, but you don't attach emotionally to it. Yeah, it's a hard concept to get, but it's an amazing thing that you can cut the strings. You're no longer a puppet of the world of ideas. Okay, let's go on to another question.
Next question from the live stream is from Danny in Kansas City, United States. Recently, I suffered a fall on the ice, resulting in injury. I felt guilty, thinking that I put in the causes to create that karma. How can I consider karma more skillfully?
Yeah, well, we do things like we make bad judgments. We invest in a harebrained scheme and lose our money. And there's no doubt who did it. We did. Maybe we thought, I'm going to make lots of money. I feel lucky today. So you put the money in there and then, boop, you lose it. And then you think, what an idiot I am. How could I have done that? So this is cause and effect. Karma is just the idea of cause and effect. Usually in the moral dimension. So we were familiar with that. In the West, it's called justice. If you do certain things, then certain consequences may follow. From a Buddhist point of view, it's like you don't have to end up in court for justice to take place. The universe is a court of justice. And negative intentional actions, speech and actions that are negative, destructive, based in hostility or greed, have unwanted results. And so the way to think about this is like, okay, well, that's the way it is in the universe, and there's no getting mad at the court of the universe. It is this way, and I didn't make it this way. I don't even approve of it, but it's this way. So what I'm going to do now is put in the right causes, good causes that have wanted results, and I'm going to avoid putting in negative causes that have unwanted results. That's a good thing to know, because otherwise, if you don't have a sense that there is such a thing as karma or justice or anything, you're in a world that is absolutely meaningless, and your decisions, your moral content has zero meaning or results. So you can do good actions all day long and nothing, it's just random what comes as a result of that. You could do negative actions all day long and it's just random and not connected. The results are not connected to that. And many people have that belief. They think that there is no consequence, that morality is just mere opinions of the day, just changes whether you kill people or don't kill people or steal or not steal. It's just relative random stuff. Nobody's watching. Nobody's taking. There's no consequences to this. Fine, live in that world. You'll find out. You'll find out how it feels. You're in a tale. That life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And lots of very bright people believe that. They're committed to that, or they think they are. If I question them very deeply, it turns out they usually hedge their bets. But many a materialist philosopher, very bright, high IQ, gone to university, will say, that's absolutely meaningless. There's no, yeah, go ahead, live with it. Live with a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. By the way, I didn't make up that line. That's Shakespeare. Okay, next question.
A next question is from the live stream from Waladagar. Greetings, Bhante. Can you say a little about the concept of the guardian of the teaching? Does it mean to guard Theravada from Mahayana?
Well, guardian of the teaching, the Buddha does ask those who are committed to the Dhamma to, first of all, find out what the Dhamma is and then to guard it from what is called counterfeit teaching. So there's a website called Fake Buddha Quotes. Brilliant idea, because people say the Buddha said this. On fortune cookies you'll find the Buddha says, you will do well in business, whatever. But the Buddha didn't say that. So you're interested in what did the Buddha say, and authentically, and not what people have made up and put in the mouth of the Buddha. This happens with people all the time. They're strategizing, they're spinning the situation, and they try to get a celebrity, say a Hollywood celebrity, to sell tickets. Get O.J. Simpson to do a run through an airport and jump over a turnstile. How'd that work out? Was he a good role model? They get all kinds of people that are supposed to be, who they misquote and attribute all kinds of, depending on their strategy, their game that they're playing, they will misquote and distort and reinterpret all kinds of things. So Buddhists are left with that as well. So the search is on for the authentic word of the Buddha, and then to carefully consider it and work with it so that you understand it yourself. There's all kinds of fake Einstein quotes as well. I know there's a quote that I come across about Einstein praising Buddhism, like as the ideal religion for the 20th century or 20. I don't know. I don't think he actually said that. It's too bad he didn't say that. But so we're always asking ourselves, what's the truth here? We know humans can be so devious and also they're not intentionally liars, but they're quite often just wrong or deluded. So we're we're on the alert for that. My own preference, I favor the authenticity of the early Buddhist texts, and I spend my time examining these things very carefully to see what even within them, are there anything being slipped in even in the earliest days of the Buddha. So that I look at the Pali Canon, and I don't just take for granted that every sutta is straight out of the mouth of the Buddha. I look carefully at them, and some of them are obviously the product of monks. But are they in line with the teachings of the Buddha? So that's what the Buddha asked us, are they in line with my teachings? And if not, then set it aside. So these are the things. And I'm not in the Mahayana school. I started, in fact, with the Mahayana ideas and trained with some Mahayana monk teachers and so forth, and examined their sutras and so forth. And I'm much more pleased with the Theravada teachings of early Buddhism. Yeah. Okay, I think we will call it a day. Next week will be a Q&A, but it will be pre-recorded. It won't be a live stream Q&A, but the questions will be taken from they have been submitted prior in previous times. So stay tuned for that. But we will be back theoretically on next Sunday, 9 a.m. Pacific time, with a Q&A, but not a live Q&A. But you can join for that. Okay.